Alrighty, so let's begin. If you guys have any questions, obviously go ahead and ask while we do this. So you guys should be able to see the screen and everything. Let's go over the 2022 model. So ideally, removing all of the endless dialogue ICT has for us, the 2022 model is essentially a time frame structure that helps us identify when the market is potentially going to do a reversal. I'd say that's the best way to put it. When it's going to do a reversal in a set area, as we can see, usually reversals happens after liquidity is swept. This can be practically any sort of liquidity, high time frame, mid time frame, or small time frame, and we can see the market react in an according way. Now, usually, the high tier 2022 models are the ones that come with, you could say, a sort of checklist. The checklist that we can put for it, might as well write it here, is first we want to see a high time frame liquidity be swept. That's the number one thing right there. In seeing a high time frame liquidity being swept, it not only gives us the notion that that could be the extent that the market wanted to seek a certain draw, and it gives you a high probability that price may either seek to now retrace or potentially reverse. High liquidity sweeps can be like the hourly liquidities, the daily liquidities, the weekly, so the 4 hours. I would say would be the most predominant ones that you want to ideally wait for price to sweep. And right after, you want to see fractally, right? Assuming like with the whole analogy of the bow and arrow, you want to see the small time frame create the ignition that's going to lead to the mid time frame and the high time frame reaction. So once a high time frame liquidity is swept, ideally you want to keep your eyes on the small time frames being the 1 minute, and from there you can identify if price does a raid first. It's always important that we see raids or SMTs. They are always going to be our clues of manipulation happening during price, especially after a high time frame liquidity is swept. If we do manipulation, that's a good sign that you do not have to worry for potential manipulation again. Because what could happen is, let's say it sweeps liquidity, you enter your position, and then it goes against you, stops you out, and then it runs immediately to where you thought it was going. That's because you were a victim of a manipulative move of either a raid or potential divergence. Now, that's why you often even see JD, he doesn't enter a trade until he sees certain manipulation happen, because it's very common, especially with NASDAQ, for it to seek to do some sort of quick liquidity raid just to stop people out before doing the expansive move. Or, as he likes to put it, a soup. Now, after you've identified that, it's very important that you guys see a displacement with a market structure shift. Why is it important to see a displacement? Because the magnitude of how strong the candle is when it expands and takes out that swing high or that swing low in that expansion gives you that sentimentality and confidence that price does really want to be directed to a certain way. And it goes back to the rate idea. Price can definitely shoot up to a direction and take out a higher low, but if it's unable to displace beyond taking out that higher low, it could be a raid, it could be an inducement, or it could just be a quick manipulative move to soup an area and then immediately sell off against you, or the opposite direction if you try to look for sells. That's why it's important that we see displacement occur and firm candle body close above a previous swing high or swing low for that market structure shift. When you get that, you can relatively have confidence that, okay, it did a raid, it did a shift, a firm one as well. That's telling me that the likelihood that it's going to come back down against me is a lot more decreased. After that, I would say the PD array that you use for your entry doesn't necessarily have to be a fair value gap. The 2022 model kind of always has these examples with a fair value gap, but I think it can practically be anything. If you have a volume imbalance, you can take that. If you have an order block, a breaker, mitigation, inversion, BPR, all of them are relatively good PD arrays to use right after. I think the main emphasis of the 2022 model is this little process that you want to see right before a liquidity sweep, a raid, and a displacement. The displacement is always going to be important. Now, of course, once that happens, you kind of want to wait for a retracement to happen into the PD array, ideally the 50% of it. Doesn't always happen. Sometimes we get a quick IO fed, but retracement is ideally what we want to always look for. And that's when you kind of pull the trigger. A very simple checklist that you want to have. This is ideally how you identify a nice 2022 model appearing before you. Now, regarding the probability of success, let's say, is it really going to succeed? Is this going to be the 2020 model that I catch, that catches the bottom or catches the top of the market and the market just shoots towards the opposite direction? Not necessarily. This is why it's an entry model, because this is not a 100% win rate model that every time it appears, it's going to work. No, this is an entry model. This is supposed to give you guidance to know exactly when to enter. But whether the entry is, or the idea is right, it's based on different things, like always. It's based on context, it's based on narrative, it's based on the draw, it's based on, let's say it took out the high time frame liquidity, but right as it took it, there was a 4-hour fair value gap. Okay, that's a confluence right there. Let's say right in that 4-hour fair value gap, there was a 1-hour order block. Another context. Let's say as it did the raid, it tapped midnight. There you get narrative, there you get extra confluences that improve the probability of success. So I don't want you guys to think that the 2022 model is simply a thing that gives you the clear direction that, oh yeah, it's right before my eyes, it's 100% gonna work, I gotta take it right here because it's right there, right? It did all the checklist things. The checklist helps you identify it for the entry, but you always want to base it more on the context surrounding it, right? You can use the quarterly theory, you can use the high time frame PD arrays or the confluences. Once you have your draw, if you see the trend and then you see a 2022 model supporting the trend, you can take it like that. Good, nice probability for it to succeed. Now, how does this look like with live price? Well, an example that we had today, right? The trades that we took. When I woke up, or when I at least saw the charts, I saw that we took out the 4-hour sell side. Oh, just give me a second.